40 years ago, they locked traditional Catholics out of their own church because they wanted the Latin Mass. Today, in North Carolina, the bishop is locking traditional Catholics out of their churches again. Tonight, what's the real reason they hate the Latin Mass? Where will Pope Leo come down on this? And how will traditional Catholics respond? Plus, next week, 25,000 Catholics take to the road to Chartres to have Latin Mass in the most iconic cathedral in Europe. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I am Michael Matt. This is the Remnant Underground. Nope, nada, never, absolutely not. The revolution is not over. It does continue. It does go on. The only difference now, as we're seeing in national headlines, the revolution is getting pretty desperate. The Bishop of Chartres comes to mind. He's out there right now feverishly trying to crush the Latin Mass people. Once again, I just find that to be so amazing in the middle of all that's going wrong in the world. This poor boomer bishop just can't leave that alone. He's got to attack people. One of the very few, I would imagine, in his diocese, one of the few high spots, good things that are happening, some growth, some development, some youth, vitality, and he's got to crush it. Now, he says that the folks there are guilty of rejecting Vatican II, which, of course, he gets from the late, great Pope Francis. He claims that there are there people going to that Mass who claim that the new Mass is invalid. Latin Mass because we think that the new Mass is invalid. Now, anybody who's ever actually gone to a diocesan approved Latin Mass knows how patently, well, I was going to say false, but how ridiculous this, how absurd this is. And here's why. Built right into the accusation is its own refutation. It's a lie, or it's so stupid. I'm sorry, I'm battling a little cold tonight, so my voice is, I've been shouting about this nonsense for too much. I'm losing my voice, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, any traditionalist worth his salt who says Vatican II is rejected out of hand, the new Mass is invalid, he sure as heck is not taking advantage of a diocesan Latin Mass offered by a Vatican II heretic, is he? We all know this. Everybody knows this. If you believe it's invalid, you're not going to go to a Mass in which a priest is offering that invalid Novus Ordo Mass at 8 o'clock, and then at your 10 o'clock he's saying a Latin Mass. You're not going to do that, especially if you think Vatican II should be rejected out of hand, which of course Archbishop Lefebvre never did, Michael Davies never did, my father never did.
The Council taught there must be no changes unless the good of the Church genuinely and certainly required them. If any change has been made in the Missal which is not genuinely and certainly required by the Church, then someone is being disobedient to the Second Vatican Council. It's not the people who go to Tridentine Masses. We didn't disobey the Council and devastate the Mass by removing prayers and ceremonies. Take, for example, the kneeling at the Incarnatus in the Creed. Why was that taken out? That originally came into the Creed as an affirmation of belief in the divinity of Christ at a time when it was being denied. The divinity of Christ is being denied today. Why take out the Incarnatus in the Creed? Do you know anybody who's a better Catholic because of it? Why take out the last Gospel? That's one of the greatest affirmations in itself of the divinity of our Lord. Do you know anybody who's a better Catholic because of that? Are your children better Catholics because those beautiful offertory prayers have been removed? No. The Council has been defied on a colossal and massive scale by the people who brought in these changes.
And the dirty little secret, once again, is that it's not because some traditionalists reject Vatican II, and everybody knows that. Latin Mass centers, the diocesan Latin Mass centers are chock full of what? Little kids, families, folks just trying to make a go of it, homeschoolers. They're not into Vatican II debates, and everybody knows this. So that's not it. Obviously, that's absurd. That's not what it is. It's not because the Latin Mass is in Latin. It's not because of the Latin language, which they sometimes say, well, people don't know Latin. I don't know what the good Bishop Michael Martin down in Charlotte is going to do now that Pope Leo is speaking a lot of Latin, in fact, teaching people how to sing Latin in the Vatican right now. I just came back from Rome. We heard a lot of Latin, so I'm not sure what the good bishop is doing there. That's the official language of the church still, and he says we got to get rid of it because nobody knows it, right? My 7-year-old knows enough Latin to follow along excellency in a Latin Mass. It actually isn't rocket science. So what is it then? What's really, of course we know what it is, but rhetorical questions are fun. We know it's not the communion rails. That's not what it is. It's not the traditional vestments. Nah. Actually, what's going on here, in every rubric, in every line, the traditional Latin Mass preaches and teaches traditional Catholic dogma and immutable truth. That's the problem. You heard it here first. Because the Novus Ordo, what's going on, I'm not even talking about the Novus Ordo of Vatican II, I'm saying the way things are going now, it's just a church chock full of options. All the options in the world. Do whatever you want. Go to Mass on Sunday if you want, go to Mass on, maybe Saturday night if you want, skip the holy days, no abstinence on Friday, no. It's completely free flowing, do whatever you want, So the only time options don't matter, as we're seeing, and this is about in a second here, I'm going to really praise His Excellency for making this clear. The only time, this whole idea of giving people freedom and giving them options when it doesn't matter at all, when they actually expose themselves for the frauds that they are, is when it comes to Latin Mass Catholics. Not for you. Nope. No options for you. You're only going to do exactly what we say. You see, in the Latin Mass, there are no options, even liturgically, not many options. It's pretty straightforward. It's codified by St. Pius V. And for a modernist, without his options, that's like a junkie without his heroin. That's what they do every single time they walk out there on the altar. They stroll around out there, they joke, and there's no form, there's very little matter, there certainly isn't much content. Do whatever you want. It's all your option. You do whatever you want, These guys will stomp on the face of their own mothers in defense of liturgical options, unless, of course, the option happens to be the Latin Mass. We need to look into this. I tweeted him on X the other day. I said, Excellency, are you okay? Because this just seems like anger management, like you're really, really angry at your flock, you're angry at your church. Maybe it's time to find a different gig, because this doesn't make sense. And a lot of people in the world who are not even Catholics are looking at this going, why is this bishop so angry? Who cares what Mass these people attend, Now, if you actually have gone to diocesan Latin Masses, as I have forever, you see this amazing unifying sense. Some of you might remember the argument of the month.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for Remnant TV. We're live at the argument of the month in St. Paul, Minnesota, with director Kent Werktel. Kent, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Good. Well, listen, we're looking at 500 guys out here tonight. Is this common? Is this normal for the argument of the month to have this many guys?
Yeah, for the last 2 years.
The argument of the month was full of Latin Mass guys, but it was outnumbered. The Latin Mass guys were outnumbered by the Novus guys. So we got together every Tuesday night, had these great discussions, had a beer and a steak, and debated stuff. Loved each other. We were like brothers, right? We didn't go to the same Latin Mass. We played on the same the same church league softball teams, same picnics. We know the differences are there, but we're all brothers. We have to be. Do you know why? Because we share a church building, and more importantly, we share a pastor that we all love. So everybody knows this is a lie about unity. That's just an absolute crock. You know it. It just shouldn't be given the time of day, right? But this is the new order. And the Latin Mass represents the old order of Christendom. And so that's why the Bishop of Chartres, in my opinion, he's just being honest. In fact, I'm writing him an open letter, a letter of gratitude for essentially confirming every paranoid overreaction the traditionalists ever uttered about this revolution over the past half century. Because that's what the neo-Catholics used to say about us. You guys got to shut up, man. Who you think you're more Catholic than the Pope? I mean, just go along with this stuff. They're not doing anything but trying to welcome people back into the church, and they're just trying to make it a kinder, gentler church, right? Well, that's not what the traditionalists said. We said that the modernists, actually, there was a revolution going on in the church, and that these modernists wanted to change what Catholics believe by changing how Catholics pray. Lex orandi, lex credendi, right? That's the law. The revolution has been trying to tear down that old, stodgy Roman rite all along. The neo-Catholics were denying that, but that's what they were trying to do, tear it down. Because the liturgical infrastructure of the old Catholic dogma and moral theology, right? That's what the Latin Mass is. It contains the infrastructure of that old traditional Catholic dogma, moral theology, and they've abandoned all that, right? They want to have rainbow masses and hoo-hoo, just be comics up there telling Ferris Bueller jokes as they wander around the sanctuary with their stale boomer sermons. You know what I mean?
Anyone? Bueller? Just the faculty got the Bueller reference, but that's okay.
And of course they want a new Mass. This isn't a continuation of the old Mass. This is not a reform. They're not reforming the liturgy. They never were, and that's what we were saying. They want a new Mass. Everything started in 1965 when Council Vatican II ended. They want a new catechism. They want a new evangelization. Everything's new, right? New calendar, new Mass, a Novus Ordo. Now, we saw that if you think, well, I'm not a Latin Mass guy, so you should, Michael, Matt, you got to kind of calm down a little bit. We don't even go to Latin Mass, okay? Well, this is going to affect you. No, it's just Traditionis Custodes also talks about changes to the Novus Ordo Mass, getting rid of Latin there and changing things there and breaking down sort of the rigidity there as well. And I saw this in the Vatican Press Hall.
So we have a liturgy, the one of Paul VI, the Second Vatican Council. And of course, small things can always be changed, can be adapted. The fact is that many people have written at the beginning, when the Synod started in its first and second phase, that they had problems, that sometimes liturgy did not speak to them. So we have to take it serious.
And the end game here is that the Protestantization of the Catholic Church, right? DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of. That's modernism has always been in favor of that. And to have this traditional rite that's so strong and so Catholic and so unlike any other liturgy in the world, well, that just makes it doesn't level the playing field, let's put it that way. So we have to tear it all down. That's what they're doing. They are, just as Michael Davies said they were doing 40 years ago, they are finishing the work of the Protestant Revolution. What you're looking at down in Charlotte is not some anomaly. This is Cranmer's Godly Order 2.0, right? Where tables got to replace altars, communion in the hand, muumuus are going to replace the sacred vestment. Even pop music will replace sacred music, and they've been at this for a long time as well. And don't forget, friends, as we now, all of us are trying to figure out what the future holds, what Pope Leo is going to be all about, one shortcut we can hope to find out is what Pope Leo thinks of the Pact of the Catacombs.
So you're asking the obvious question. What is the Catacomb Pact? What was this original Catacomb Pact? And here's where it just gets really weird. I promise you, this is not something out of a Malachi Martin book. This is true. This is history. It's a very mysterious, very weird event. It took place 50 years ago on the evening of November 16th, 1965. It was before I was born. Some 40 Catholic bishops, and they're bishops from South America, by the way, they gathered together in the catacombs of St. Domitilla to swear an oath to change the Catholic Church forever by transforming her into a church of the poor.
Signed 50 years ago at the time of Vatican II by Catholic bishops in this underground church in Rome. Called the Pact of the Catacombs, it vowed to create a poor church for the poor, the same church Pope Francis says he wants today.
Yes, we have to go back on November 16th, 1965, and that evening, around 40 Father Council
Fathers.
Father, gathered in catacomb of Domitilla, and they decide, for example, to refuse, for example, to be called Eminency, Monsignor. So they wanted to be called like Father. And we can say, for example, that they decide to refuse all the insignia.
Okay.
And when I say insignia, it means
like the cross, the rings.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting at some point if we can find out if Leo, who's a much younger man, if he's interested in this crazy hippie Pact of the Catacombs. I suspect he's not, but we can keep an eye on that and try to find out. In the meantime, we would say to the Bishop of Chartres, thank you, Your Excellency, thank you for clarifying exactly what this revolution is all about and has been all about since the very beginning. But anyway, here's poor Bishop Boomer down in Charlotte. He wants to get rid of the prayer to St. Michael, the Archangel. God knows why. Literally, God knows why. He wants to ban that 2,000-year-old venerable rite of the church, you know, the only mass that Padre Pio ever knew, the only mass that St. Joan of Arc ever knew. All the saints, virgins and martyrs, popes in history, all the way back to Peter. It's a mass, and this guy, Bishop Boomer in Charlotte, North Carolina, he wants to ban it. Can you imagine? This has got to be the dumbest bishop, one of the dumbest bishop. Okay, I'm not going to single him out. In terms of, like, if you have a hierarchical lineup of intelligent bishops, this has got to be the dumbest class ever. I'm sorry for some of the ones who are very intelligent out there, like my friend Bishop Schneider. But for the most part, these guys are incredible. So that one of these guys would come up and say, oh, I have an idea. Let's ban the Latin Mass. Bishop Boomer. It's incredible. You know, but go ahead, Bishop Boomer. I have no problem with this. Oh, my voice is really not going to survive this show. I don't even care because this guy doesn't really. I meet this guy with half my voice. You know, Bishop Boomer, go ahead, make profits out of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. Please make my day. Make my father into a prophet because he knew you were coming. Make Dietrich von Hildebrand into a prophet, won't you? Michael Davies, oh my gosh, did he ever see you coming? He wrote books. He wrote trilogies of books about you, Bishop Boomer. He knew you were coming. We all did. Make prophets out of all the traditional Catholic pioneers who predicted, now with incredible pinpoint accuracy, that the day was coming when you, Bishop Boomer, all dressed up in your fancy muumuu and your new robes, would come prancing out into the sanctuary, the bulldozed sanctuary of the Catholic Church, as the abomination of desolation in the holy place, and claim that your new religion had no room whatsoever for the old religion. Because that's what you've done, your boomerness. And this is what I say, look at how they comport themselves, hold themselves, these bishops, these princes of the apostle. Look at this guy in his own holy of holies, in the sanctuary. Check this out.
Come on. It's all right. It wasn't a problem the other night. We had a good time, right?
Yeah.
What is your name?
Kate.
Kate. This is Kate. Say hi to Kate. Hi, Kate. Kate had this headband on that had hair, right? Big hair, big orange hair, and then I was a little jealous of it, and so I said, "Can I wear that?" And so I put it on. I was wondering, are you a little jealous of my hat right now?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, well, why don't we try and see how this works? Does that work? Does that look good? Are you okay?
I'm sorry, friends. I got a cold. I'm a little bit running thin on patience right now, but God help us. What is that? Can you imagine taking that seriously for any reason ever? I'm sorry. I remember when bishops used to bishop, and they sounded like bishops. They acted like bishops, like this one.
And this is why our preaching fails. And effeminate Christ, who never deals with guilt or sin, but just supports our positions. We use him instead of him using us.
How did we get from that to this?
Our hype squad might have a few characters in it, but God bless them. They're willing to put orange hair bandanas around their head and run around and look like goofballs. They're willing to be characters for the sake of something greater. There's something good in that.
And friends, again, there's nothing new here, you know. They've been trying to do this for a long time, trying to burn the Catholic city down from within her own walls. They rolled that Trojan horse in a long time ago, you know, that modernist Trojan horse, and out they came to destroy the Catholic Church from within. And Bishop Boomer here is simply confirming, you know, he's simply making it obvious that that's exactly what he's literally saying. There's no room in this new church for 2,000 years of Catholic liturgical patrimony. Now remember, these guys are just, the enemy came from outside of the Catholic walls, right? They came in to try to destroy the church. You know, then they killed they beheaded, you know, the Catholic kings and queens. And then they ended the confessional state. They trashed the altars, got to get rid of the altars, and criminalized popery.
Has this king forgotten the Reformation? Mr. Cumberland! Away with it! Popish! Idolaters! Now bow down to them! Has this king forgotten the Spanish Inquisition? Is the Roman Catholic Church to have a seat in Westminster?
They're still at it, still trying to get rid of the Mass 500 years later. Man. And then they murdered the Latin Mass priests. Who knows, that may still be coming, right?
I am a Catholic man and a priest. In that faith have I lived, and in that faith do I intend to die.
So what's my point? My point is that Bishop Michael Martin of Charlotte, North Carolina has been here all along. The folks in Ireland knew him. Like my forefathers in Ireland would have known him years ago during the penal times. Like his predecessors forced my ancestors, like Catholic ancestors, to hide in the woods to offer the Latin Mass on the Mass Rocks.
That is this ancient Mass Rock on the grounds of Glenstall Abbey in Maru, County Limerick, the Archdiocese of Cashel and Emily. Invariably from ancient times, from the penal times, Mass Rocks were located in very secluded, sometimes very beautiful areas like this in the woods, where priests could be safe with their congregations to celebrate Mass at a time of persecution.
They survived. They kept the faith. After that happened, after they made the Mass illegal in Ireland, what happened? Ireland rocks the world with this by sending out. They had a vocations explosion in Ireland that pretty much Catholicized most of the United States of America. It was so powerful. So many big Irish Catholic families after the days of the Mass Rocks. That's what happened because they kept hope alive, kept the faith. And the same thing happened in France. We told the story over and over again.
Outlaw priests offered outlawed masses in the woods of the Vendée under the cover of night. They gave their lives rather than betray the church during a reign of terror which saw Catholic kings, queens, priests, and nuns slaughtered in the streets of Paris.
And then ultimately they did the same thing here in this revolution in our own time periods. Only they, like I say, they got over the walls. And the traditional Catholics in that case were forced once again to go underground. How do I know? Because I was there. So I'm very sorry, sincerely sorry for the clans in Charlotte, North Carolina. God bless you guys. Hang in there. I know you're fighting. Just keep doing it. I know what you're going through. You did it with me, with our family up here years and years ago, 50 years ago, when they came in and bulldozed the sanctuaries of our little parish church, literally bulldozed it when I was just a boy. I think I've told you the story, out riding my bike a few weeks later, and what do I see in the parking lot for curbstones but hunks of the high altar, where the traditional Latin Mass had been celebrated for 80 years in a little parish church. This was just over the hill from my house, my home. It's where we all grew up, walking to Mass over the hill and down to Mass, right? It was one of those kind of parishes. That's what they wrecked last time. They shut it all down. They threw out our old pastor. He's right here. This was a lot later. This beautiful, beautiful Catholic priest. They threw him out, because he wouldn't go along with them, My older siblings, in fact, they remember how in Catholic school, how it was when one day the nuns were fully habited, brides of Jesus Christ, and the next day they showed up in short dresses and high heels. To hear my siblings explain it, it's like a spiritual abuse of Catholic children everywhere. And no wonder our Catholic neighborhood blew up. The families blew up. Most of the kids with whom I grew up, they all left the church. They're long gone now. And I would say, and I say this as maybe a suggestion to those who are raising kids or just starting out, I would say one of the only reasons, probably the only reason that my family of nine children in my family, my 8 siblings, the only reason we didn't go AWOL was because my father went to war for tradition. He turned what we were doing as a family into a counter-revolution every day, all day. right? All year long. It was a counter-revolution, cultural, liturgical when possible, but Catholic counter-revolution. And he used his pen, which was mighty. Well, it wasn't a pen, really. It was a functioning print shop in our basement, as I've described before. I've showed you some of this footage before because I want you to get ready and I want you to understand that this has all happened before and we survived it and we became stronger than ever after that particular reign of terror. But yeah, my father set this print shop up in the spirit of St. Maximin Kolbe, I guess, started cranking out truth tracts every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. It's still here, in fact. Just got one hot off the press. Every 2 weeks. He made this little newspaper that just kept on hammering away and never gave up all through my childhood. This is what it looked like. Back then, that's pre-internet. That's obviously pre-email. That's how it was done, with wax and cutting it out. I remember cutting out those columns and laying it out and rolling it out and putting it on a camera and a plate burner, and taking care of the plates and making them nice and clean and get them on an old 360 printing press. And it would go ring-a-ring-a-ring-a-ring-a-ring. We'd print 10,000 copies that way. 16-page newspaper every 2 weeks. The labor of love, But I'm going down this little memory lane so that I can impress upon you how much in the past, how much the pioneer traditional Catholics believed, how much they were ready to fight. They were ready to do whatever it takes. My father lost his entire career, walked out on his career as a Catholic newspaper publisher, right down here in downtown St. Paul, to start over with that little press, that little remnant press, right? To start over. That's how much they believed. That's how much they would not be deterred. That's how much faith they had, and as I was talking last week, that's how much hope they had. They knew God was going to ultimately restore his church. It's his church to save. But they just had to do their part, And as I've explained down here before, my father had my sisters and me confirmed in secret by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. There's no secret about that anymore. I'm very proud of that. But you can see in this video right here, both of us, me a little kid, and there's the Archbishop on the screen long time ago. Friends, these were very, very uncertain times. We didn't know what was going to happen. There wasn't a lot to go on. Very sketchy, Everybody had gone along, hook, line, and sinker with the revolution. That's the way it was, When they took the Mass away from our friends over in France, far from leaving the church, far from abandoning ship, they literally broke down the door of the church and took it back. That's the way it was. And today that church, by the way, is in the hands of one of the Ecclesia Dei orders, and is still offering the Latin Mass. Huge following of traditional Latin Mass families, So many souls saved because of that. Same thing happened in Saint Nicolas de Chardonnay in Paris, the birthplace really of the traditional Catholic counter-revolution in Paris. We go there every year whenever we can with remnant tours before the pilgrimage. This is in 1977. You had faithful Catholics in Paris who occupied this church, the ones that you see on the screen right now, just a stone's throw from Notre Dame in Paris, right in the city center. They just simply refused to leave their church. And then since then, priests of the Society of St. Pius X have come in, and they're there to this day. We always stop there, in fact, just to sort of remind our pilgrims of the fight that went on before, the sacrifice our fathers in the faith made in order to stay in the church and keep the faith. You say, well, the SSPX, they left the church. They didn't stay. Well, no, did they? It's a funny kind of schism, isn't it? Because when Pope Leo appeared on the loggia just the other day, the SSPX district superiors called for calm, and certainly this does not sound like a schismatic spirit to me. Here's what they said. Quote, as an apostolate of the Catholic Church, The Society of St. Pius X prays for Pope Leo XIV at every Mass and offers prayers daily for the success of his reign. The Church remains beset by a crisis that lasted for nearly 6 decades. Now this man is charged with the care of 1.4 billion souls. It is imperative that all of us, the priests, religious, and lay faithful who attend the Society's chapels, pour out our prayers for the Pope with all the fervor we can muster." End quote. It's a beautiful Catholic sentiment. I couldn't agree more. That's essentially what we've been saying right from day one. Now, for one of the most public examples of what I'm trying to say and what I've been trying to do with respect to Pope Leo XIV, what the Catholic reaction needs to be in a time like this. I'm just going to use the Chartres pilgrimage, which many of you know all about, which is a 3-day, 2-night, 70-mile walk across France in defense of or in proclamation of the kingship of Christ and defense of the traditional faith. 40 years ago, when the pilgrimage was first restarted again, of course, it's a medieval pilgrimage, goes back 1,000 years, but when they first restarted it again after Vatican II, and they walked all those miles, those kilometers, from Paris to Chartres, when they got to the cathedral, their own cathedral, guess what? The gates were locked. They weren't allowed in. They had to have Mass outside. But the traditionalists continued to do the pilgrimage anyway. And they never compromised. They always trusted in God. They kept hope alive. So this is my little secret weapon. When I talk about uniting the clans, when I talk about keeping hope alive, we've been doing it in France. Personally, I've been doing it for 32 years. I've seen it work. I've seen it convert people. I've seen it influence actual politics over there. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of vocations come out of it. Young families keeping the faith and people getting along, actually. Traditionalists, Pius X, non-SSPX, kind of getting along pretty well. The clans have been uniting on the road to Chartres most of my adult life, right? And so they did that after they were locked out of their own cathedral. They went back until the doors were open to them. They simply never gave up. And now what have we seen? We've seen princes of the Catholic Church come into the Chartres pilgrimage, offering the Latin Mass in the Cathedral of Chartres, the most high-profile cathedral probably in Europe, right? Cardinal Burke, Cardinal Sarah, Cardinal Muller, Bishop Schneider, they've all offered the traditional Latin Mass there. But to drive that point home now, there are rumblings that some bishops in France, they've sent a letter, they're angry. They're angry, and there's a certain cardinal in Rome who seems to be Cardinal Boomer as well, and he's quite angry about the Latin Mass. He wants to shut it down, especially at Chartres. They're trying to curb the Chartres pilgrimage traditional Latin Masses. Now, they have failed this year. What's going to happen next year? I don't know. But the point is, there still are efforts, powerful efforts, to shut the Chartres pilgrimage down. So enough with this whole idea, well, you compromised and got what you wanted. No, that's not it at all, you know? And if they succeed in shutting down the Latin Masses at Chartres, well, then the pilgrimage is going to have to go outside the cathedral again, you know? We'll have to have Mass outside. We'll go in the woods. It'll keep going, and we'll just wait for the regime to change again in a better direction towards tradition, you know? We know the drill, in other words. We're never going to stop coming. I'm talking about the pilgrims. All of us, the clans, are never going to stop now. You know, so the big question, where does Leo stand on all of this? Well, we're all going to find out together soon enough. But I really want to close on a hypothetical that includes the Chartres pilgrimage, reference to the Chartres pilgrimage. On your screen right now, you see me venerating and kissing the ring of the Bishop of Chartres, Bishop Ristori. Is that because he's a traditional Catholic? No, not at all. He's not. He's never claimed to be, right? He's not. But it's because he's a bishop, and we honor his position as a successor of the apostles. Back in 1984, when my father went to our local bishop to get permission to use Pope John Paul's first indult in order to have limited use of the Latin Mass, he kissed the bishop's ring, and the bishop pulled his hand away and said, "We don't do that anymore." My father says, "Oh, yes, we do. I'm venerating the office, Your Excellency," and he kissed his ring. And I was standing there, and I saw that. I'll never forget it, because I knew my father absolutely, couldn't stand this guy. But he was in charge. He's a prince of the church. And he was, as a Catholic gentleman, as a Catholic man, he knew how to treat. And he knew that was to treat him anywhere else would reflect badly on him. And he wasn't going to do it, not as a Catholic. So now, back to the Bishop of Chartres. A few years ago, my son Walter, interviewed the Bishop of Chartres. You might remember this.
I think the pilgrimage is a walk, as the life as a Christian is a walk following Christ. So it's a good thing to walk together, to show the image of a dynamic church full of joy and brotherhood. So I'm very happy to come and to walk for a few kilometers with the groups, the chapters, and to welcome them in my cathedral, especially tomorrow for the Holy Mass.
2 years after that, I actually had lunch with His Excellency as a representative of the U.S. pilgrims that year, because the bishop who said the Mass in Chartres was an American, and so they wanted to have an American sort of contingency to have lunch with him. Now, just imagine, that lunch is what I wanted to talk about. Just imagine if halfway through that lunch, I'm thinking about all the things that have been saying online, that have been said online right now against Pope Leo. And people say you got to say it like it is, and so they're denouncing him, and he's one of them, and all this stuff. And I was thinking, I remember sitting across the table from the Bishop of Chartres at the bishop's house, at the bishop's table, this beautiful lunch that we have after the pilgrimage. What if I had suddenly taken it upon myself to shout at the bishop, "You, sir, you are part of the Vatican II sect, and I denounce you. I'm watching you. I denounce you as a Vatican II heretic." Would you think that's a good idea? Would anybody think that's a good idea? Oh, wow, Michael, Matt, you're saying it like it is. I don't think anybody in this audience would think that was a good idea. That's boorish behavior, right? In the real world, Catholics don't act that way. Only lunatics act that way. That's internet behavior is what it is. You do that online because you know you're not actually having a human experience with anybody, so you don't have to act in a human manner, right? But the Bishop of Chartres knows exactly where I stand on the Latin Mass and traditional Catholic restoration and everything else. I've compromised nothing with him. And yet he was gracious to me, and we had good conversations, we still do. Continue to make the case for tradition to him. So I'm, again, very used to this position, and it works. This year, the bishop will once again open the doors of his cathedral to 25,000 traditional Catholic young people. Their lives will be touched, vocations will be found, people will be exposed to the Latin Mass in magnificent form, right? Souls will literally be saved. And that's what I'm talking about. The war goes on no matter what, and so with our new Holy Father, we're not falling for anything. We're just standing here in our own church, making the case for sacred tradition once again, as we always have, praying that he will hear us. And on that note, friends, we are off to France, representing all of you, and walk this pilgrimage to Chartres to venerate the veil of Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary. I will be offering my pilgrimage for our church, for all of you, and especially now for our new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, that God will enlighten His Holiness and guide him so he can see what must be done and then have the courage to do it. Make sure you follow me on social media for all that. We'll try to weigh in at least once or twice a day from the road to Chartres and let everybody know how it's going and unite with you in prayers. So 20,000 clans will meet next weekend, and the good things are going to happen, I promise. It just always happens that way. So God bless you all. Pray for our Pope. Pray for us as we make this journey, and we'll see you next week from the road to Chartres.